Imagine you plunge in the water head first. You feel the cool water on your skin. You start swimming for a while. And then you come back out of the water. Now, did you get wet or not? Of course. That's what you get when you're completely immersed in something for a while. In the same way as your hair gets wet from plunging in the water, it's almost impossible not to learn anything about a topic if you immerse yourself in it completely. And personally, my quest over the last couple of years has been to learn all about the phenomenon of elegance. I haven't just occasionally thought and talked about it. I've been completely immersed, actually, in everything that relates to it. And I call this my Elegance Osmosis method. Feel free to use it if you want to learn more about elegance too. But this can be applied, obviously, to learning almost anything. And the best part about this method is that it also makes learning easier and even faster, and most importantly, more fun. So in this video, first we'll go over what I mean by this Elegance Osmosis method. Then I'll share what my Elegance Osmosis has looked like in practice over the last couple of years. And third, we'll go over the practical Elegance Experiment you can take away from this to your own life. And lastly, I'll answer to 3 objections that may come to your mind. So what is this osmosis thing I'm talking about? It's a phenomenon in biology where something absorbs what surrounds it through a semi-permeable membrane. And that's basically what happens, for example, to pickled cucumbers and gherkins. And figuratively, I'm saying that the way osmosis works in humans is that we become what we're consistently exposed to. And what we're exposed to could be called also, for example, our environment, our conditions, our context, cultural context, for example. It doesn't just include your physical location on this planet. It can also include the people you have around you, the content and media you're consuming, and the physical things around you that you have in your home, for example. They all affect us a lot, whether we realize it or not. Our emotions, conscious thoughts, as well as our subconscious, they're all affected by all this. And this effect serves us, obviously, both in the good and in the bad. But the important question is that how can we use this phenomenon to our advantage when learning or making a transformation of some sorts in our lives? In terms of the results of this method, though, I have no idea if I've become more elegant at all in other people's eyes, but at least I feel a bit more elegant in my approach to things, and I've trained my eye to notice more elegance around me, at least. So to me, elegance isn't just about aesthetics, by the way. It's a very holistic concept, a lens through which we can look at the world that helps us, for example, work more efficiently and cultivate nice inner qualities. And in fact, my whole mission with this whole channel, for example, is to help accomplished creatives like you to find ways to work with ease and find more beauty in our lives. And I share my lessons and inspiration relating to all this in my newsletter, so feel free to check it out from the link below. I'd love to connect with you. So here's what the timeline of my personal learning process has been like with this elegance thing, and what I've done in practice, actually. The first spark to learn about elegance was ignited in the fall of 2021, which seems actually quite a long time ago now. I took a course then that was called, basically, I translated this from Finnish, that's my mother tongue. So it was called Gestures, Elegance and Europe, Currents and Influences of Taste, Fashion and Etiquette Culture. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it was a very, very cool course that I really loved. And it was taught by this prominent professor of European history and a public figure called Laura Kolbe in Finland. After that course, I was very inspired by the course, and then towards the spring of 2022, I started to delve more into the niche topic inside the broad topic of elegance, which was the life and career of the opera singer Maria Callas that I often talk about on this channel. At that time, I wrote an essay about Maria Callas's performance of Habanera, or L'amour est un oiseau rebelle is the French name of the whole aria that most of us know from Georges Bizet's opera Carmen. Carmen, not Carmen, like the name Carmen. And that essay was made for a course about the analysis of music at the University of Helsinki because I was studying musicology. And that was really fun. That was really the beginning of this whole Maria Callas phase. And I started to notice the pattern of elegance in her and a bunch of other icons I was interested in. And around this time, I also got the idea that it could be nice to do a student exchange program in Paris. Because I realized that Paris is obviously very closely linked with the history of European elegance, notably. And a part of the appeal to live here was definitely that Maria Callas lived in Paris for the last years of her life, and she loved the city a lot.
Je suis venue surtout parce que ici en France, comme tout le monde, mais ici à Paris, il y a quelque chose de spécial. Ils m'ont aimé de vrai amour, je les ai aimés, c'est vrai, depuis 1958.
But then in 2023, that was my turning point, I'd say. That was when I really fueled my inspiration more and delved even deeper into learning about elegance, Maria Callas, and Paris. I scoured through YouTube to find every single interview of Maria Callas possible. I also read her letters and memoirs in French, and I listened to her recordings and stuff. It was really fun. But then, in addition to that, I watched a lot of, for example, Inès de la Fressange. I don't know how to conjugate that, but her interviews, in a way, is the famous muse of Karl Lagerfeld, the model and then fashion business person. And it was really nice to hear what her philosophy of elegance is. And also, it was just nice practice to hear how she used the French language too. I also, around that time, I think, I read also her book, La Parisienne, which is about this whole Parisian style philosophy, and I also read the famous book, French Women Don't Get Fat, and Bringing Up Bébé, and Lessons from Madame Chic. And then to work through what I'd learned, I started to also write my newsletter for the first time back then, in the beginning of 2023. And then, during that spring, I also chose to write my whole bachelor thesis about the concept of elegance and its etymology as a word. To be precise, I actually analyzed the elegant outfits and performance practices of the three singers, Maria Callas, Barbra Streisand, and Caterina Valente, in 3 performances from the 1960s. And it was just really fun. Quite a lot of work for such a small page number that I had to fit it in, but still, I was very passionate about the topic at the time, so it felt really fun. And in general, during that whole year of 2023, I lived in this state of anticipation, yearning to get out of Finland and its horrible climate, winter climate to be specific. And I did get accepted to do the student exchange program in Paris, which was a huge deal, obviously. So then I knew that I'd be moving in Paris in January 2024. But during that waiting period, I feel that this whole elegance osmosis that I was in became a form of escapism almost that inspired me, especially in the moments when the weather was just atrocious outside, if you can say that, in the wintertime. Of course, at this time, I had lots of other topics near and dear to my heart as well. It wasn't just elegance I was absorbed into, but we can say that it was still a very deep sense of inspiration and enthusiasm that I had towards it. I did try to remind myself at that time that an ideal place to live doesn't exist, that there will always be things that I think are better in Finland or in France and vice versa. Nevertheless, I had this visceral hunch that I would like to live in Paris, and I would at least try it. And it proved to be true that I really like to be here. And as you can guess, I'm speaking about living here. I am living in here at least until the end of 2025. Tell me in the comments if you get similar phases like this sometimes, that you feel you're completely inspired by a thing, that it suddenly takes over your life for a while. As you can see, it really hasn't been an accident that I've learned a lot about elegance and Maria Callas, etc. And it still hasn't ceased to fascinate me how we perceive elegance and how we can learn how to emulate it more. In other words, my elegance phase hasn't ended yet. And what it looks like currently in my life is that I still want to surround myself with things that remind me of the concepts of elegance and elegant people. For example, the LPs on the shelf there with Maria Callas. It's always inspiring to me to see her there, for example. And then I can let these icons or the ideas of elegance show in my backgrounds or my wallpapers, for example, on my laptop or on my phone. And then also I have to say that living here in Paris also helps, because basically everything in here, when you walk in the city space, everything reminds me of the history of elegance. And also finding like-minded people who also value these sort of things is very helpful. Okay, well, now it's time for our Elegance Experiment. How exciting. So the Elegance Osmosis method can be, of course, applied to basically anything you want to learn, but especially if you want to learn it on a deeper level. So here are a couple of questions for you. What are the 1 to 2 main quests you have going on right now in your life? Is your physical and mental environment helping or hindering you in keeping the direction you've chosen or completing the quest you're on? How could you alter that environment slightly so that it would be more favorable? What could you absorb by osmosis, figuratively, that would ease the transformation? But let's not be too pragmatic about this either. The point is to get creative with this. This is a way to add more fun to your life, not just to add one more thing you should be doing. No. It's just an experiment you can try for a minute or an hour or a full day or a week. You can decide. But if this doesn't resonate with you to begin with, don't try it. But I hope it does. Here's another great example of why this works, actually. If you think of language learning, a complete immersion is what you need, actually. That's why I want to live in a place where the language is spoken, because it just accelerates the learning process so much. And that's also how we learn our mother tongue as children, because we hear the language around us every waking hour, and we hear the words and conjugations of the words repeated thousands of times. So it's kind of impossible not to learn anything about it. And that's actually originally how I learned French, by the way, because I was surrounded by the language in the French kindergarten. So that's maybe one of the most effortless ways to learn a language when you're exposed to it at such a young age. But of course, you still have to work on it throughout your life. There's actually a fun expression in the Finnish language, kielikulpu, which means a language bath. So that was basically I bathed in the French language in the French kindergarten. Maybe that's an expression also in English, I have no idea. But always, we don't have the luxury of having the people around us who would inspire us to move in the right direction. So you just have to create the environment yourself through consuming content in a language, for example, or learning about elegance, for example. Concerning this, here's a fun equation that came to my mind the other day. That deep immersion plus deep work equals deep learning. This can be questioned, but somehow this makes sense to me, at least. That the learning process always becomes easier and faster because you have both your environment, your conscious and subconscious mind and actions are on board with the whole thing. Objection, my lord. What if I have to learn something I'm not interested in? It's true that this method actually comes about quite very naturally, usually. If you're really passionate about something, you will just be in the osmosis state all the time. But it can also be used to learn things that we're not that passionate about. I think the first step is to just change the language you're using around the thing you have to do. So instead of saying that I have to, I should, or I must do this, you want to say that I want to do this thing and I choose to do this thing, which means that you prime yourself to have more internal motivation towards this thing. You can fool your brain in that sense, that you just use this kind of language, that you convince yourself that I want to do this because it leads to other nice things further on, or because I just don't want to face the consequences of not doing it. And even if you don't develop a passion for the thing you want to do, you can always be generally curious about anything. That always helps, just a slight curiosity. And leaning towards this idea of immersing in it also helps to cultivate the curiosity once you learn more about it. Second objection: what if I feel I can't change my conditions? I'd say it's always good to start with the belief that you have agency in whatever situation you're in, that you're not just giving up, that I just can't do this thing, it's like way out of my power. Because you may have power over a situation, you may have more power over a situation than you think, most often. And let's not mix favorable conditions with optimal conditions. Even just like a slight betterment and a spark of inspiration can make a huge difference to create a favorable environment and a condition to do the thing. I view it as more of an exponential curve, actually, that the more you're reminded of your quest, the direction you've chosen in your daily life, in your surroundings or whatever, the more the conditions are actually favorable for the transformation to happen. Because that means that you just have more frequent boosts of inspiration once you are surrounded by the thing, and you have more encouragement to keep going. Third objection: how long do I have to be in this phase? It depends a lot on how long that inspiration lasts or has to last. Depends on how long the project is, actually, because you can re-enter the immersion as many times as you need just to finish the project. I've had phases of inspiration of like 1 or 2 days. I've just scoured through the internet to find lots of inspiration on just one person or one topic. But some phases last much longer. So there's no one answer to this, obviously. In conclusion, the one thing that you can take away from this video, the Elegance Experiment, is that we want to just go all in for a moment on something we want to learn. Immerse ourselves completely in it, because then you always have a stronger foundation, even when you start to delve into another topic on another day, or when you come back to the thing you learned about after a while. Well, I hope these ideas helped you in any shape or form. And if you want to know more about this elegance thing, and especially what we can learn from Maria Callas, in this next video I break down Callas's irresistible magnetism and what we can learn from it. So see you there. Bisous.